problem is those AI agents, they're not 100% reliable. Hey, it's Marek. Happy New Year. Welcome to the January edition, January 2026, first edition of the podcast, The Economy of Algorithms. Over the past 12 months or the entire 2025, I've written so many Substack articles. I have recorded podcasts. And I still get messages from some of my friends, some of my university friends who say, Marek, it's really interesting. You have all those great stories, but often, you talk about all those complex topics and I can't really follow. And I'm thinking those are my friends who learned AI together with me. They should know, right? But at the same time, I get it. Maybe sometimes we should stop using very, very complex academic language and just, talk to the point and say what's happening. So what I did for this podcast is I went through all of the text, all of the newsletters and podcasts that I recorded and that I wrote back in 2025, and I distilled 7 traps of artificial intelligence that everyone is falling into that I wanted to quickly go through and give you some ideas of how to avoid those traps. I think that's a really useful list, a list of 7 traps to think about in 2026. Trap number 1, how Gen AI often tells you, those chatbots often tell you, hey, this is the best email ever. You should totally send it to your boss. This is flattery by those bots. They do it because their creators, OpenAI, Anthropic, and so on, want them to be nice to us because that's how we keep coming back. That's how we keep paying our monthly subscriptions. The problem is humans really like to be flattered. Vanity, one of our weaknesses. Combine flattery and vanity, and we have a problem. We become confidently wrong because we're fooled by those chatbots. In fact, there was a study back last year on 300 executives. 50% of them, 150 of them, were told to come up or predict prices of NVIDIA stocks by discussing their predictions with a chatbot. The other 50%, also 150 executives, were asked to come up with stock price predictions for NVIDIA as well, but by chatting with their peers. So one group was chatting with chatbots, the other was chatting with other humans. The first group, chatting with chatbots, became very confident of their predictions. The second group, chatting with other peers, were full of doubts. But turns out that those who were so confident chatting with chatbots were totally wrong. Most of them were totally wrong when it comes to the predictions. Those who were not so confident, full of doubts, but chatting with other people were actually much better at predicting the future stock prices. So that's a problem, right? That's a trap we all fall into. We're too convinced about our own ideas because those flattering chatbots reinforce that thinking. How do you avoid that? I'm suggesting to turn on the hard mode. Ask your chatbots to be your biggest critic, to find flaws in your thinking. I cannot promise it will always work, but at least there's a good chance it will help you avoid trap number 1. Chatbots flattering us times us loving flattery and everyone becoming confidently wrong. Trap number 2. You know how Gen AI never says, oh, I'm not sure about that. Those systems always come up with answers. That's how they're designed. This is basically the architecture of those systems. They just extract information from the compressed representation of the world that they have. Of course, sometimes they'll be wrong, right? But they never doubt. Now, we also don't double check. There's tendency for a lot of people to just take the outputs of Gen AI and use them. The result, no one is at the wheel. No one's actually verifying those outputs. And we end up living in this sort of permanent beta testing world where customers are now being the first ones to really find flaws with those systems. It's called an AI trust paradox, right? Those systems cannot be trusted, but at the same time, they're so smooth at delivering those trustworthy responses. Taco Bell introduced Gen AI in their drive-through restaurants, where you could just talk to a chatbot and enter an order. It did not work very well. In fact, one customer managed to purchase 18,000, that's 18,000 water cups before the system realized that it doesn't make sense and handed it over to a human. The CDO of Taco Bell said, look, sometimes I'm surprised, sometimes I'm excited by those Gen AI systems. You know what? As a CDO, and we're talking about productive system, you should not be surprised by what they do. It's a bit of a problem, I would say. How do you avoid the trap of us not testing those results and those mistakes happening in real life on real customers? There's a concept of chaos monkey. It's a system that randomly breaks parts of your IT systems, your organizations, and try to do that. Introduce what I call the Break It Tuesday, where every week you just shut down some system inside your organization and see how your organization reacts. This is how you create resilience. This is how you create organizations that can respond to those problematic situations. Trap number 2. Now let's move on to trap number 3. Gen AI makes a lot of mistakes. Yep. But we trust it to be correct. Yep. Errors multiply. Everyone talks about AI agents, those software entities that can do things on our behalf. You sort of create an AI agent and let it go wild and they will do things for us. The problem is those AI agents, they're not 100% reliable. They're like 80%, 90% reliable at the moment. Whatever you tell them to do, there's a 90% chance that they do it well. But imagine a chain of agents where one agent hands over to another agent, to another agent, to another agent. A 90% reliable agent handing over to a 90% reliable agent results with an 81% reliable chain. Make it 3, you're going to have 73% reliability of that chain. Make it 15 agents handing over the work to one another. You end up with 21% reliability. Only 1 times in 5 that chain will work correctly. That doesn't make any sense, does it? We don't want those systems to be such unreliable. How do you avoid the trap? Make sure you don't have chains of just agents, but introduce humans into those chains. Maybe every second agent have a human that verifies the outcomes. That's how you avoid that trap number 3, where Gen AI makes mistakes and we trust it to be correct and then errors multiply. Trap number 4, really, really interesting. Gen AI outputs cost nothing and we're very lazy. So sometimes we just stop thinking. We just create those outputs and then we push them out. Back in 2023, Joshua Browder, the CEO of an organization called Do Not Pay, tweeted that they were looking for a human to walk into the US Supreme Court courtroom wearing an AirPod in their ear, and they asked that human to repeat whatever the machine would say. In other words, Josh Browder of Do Not Pay thought that they have a chatbot that could argue a case in front of a court, and they just needed a human. It was like a reverse robot. You know, a human that follows orders of a machine, right? A robot is a machine that follows orders of a human. We need a reverse robot, a bag of bones and meat and blood that walks into a courtroom and follows whatever the machine says. This was probably the first time somebody looked for that type of a worker who would simply just repeat what the machine said. Fast forward to 2026 now, and we have so many slopfluencers, all those people who repeat whatever ChatGPT writes to them and then they post it on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Facebook and everywhere. You can spot that AI slop, right? By the way, the word of the year 2025 by Macquarie Dictionary. Crazy time. And look, what do you do about it? Well, to avoid situations like that, slop, like this low quality content, I have 2 suggestions. One I called Pareto flip. Flip the usual order of creating content where you spend 80% on content creation and then 20% on content curation. Now that you can create content so quickly, think about it. 20% for AI content creation and then 80% on human curation. You can still use AI in that 80%, but make sure you spend that much refining that content. Yes, it'll take roughly as much time, but it will also massively increase the quality of that. Also remember about de-slopping your content. I always say you should be drafting your content like a human does, just by yourself, then dialogue with Gen AI to refine that, and then de-slop that content to remove all of those sort of Gen AI artifacts. You know what I'm talking about, all those strange expressions, hyphens, and so on and so on. Draft, dialogue, de-slop. Moving on to the next trap, trap number 5. AI agents are so easy to build right now, and we humans are a bit lazy. We don't like to plan for sort of long-term scenarios, so long-term chaos unfolds. OpenAI late in 2025 introduced Agent Kit, a piece of software that allows you to build an agent in just 8 minutes. Now imagine a department in your organization, everyone decides to build an agent right now. You end up with 50 agents built in one day. In fact, I was running a session for Singularity University a few months ago, and we had about 20, 30 executives in the room. The stuff that they built in maybe 45 minutes using Gen AI tools was mind-blowing, how much they built, how great those things were. But think about all those executives now building AI agents. After a week or two, you end up with 400, 500 agents. Who pays for those agents? Who's the owner? Who remembers the password to the consoles to control those agents? What if some of those agents start to misbehave? How do you shut them down? Do you remember the password at all? So we need to start managing those agents. Build not just human relations departments in your organizations, but also agent relations. Appoint an owner, appoint somebody who's responsible. Make sure you think about those agents in a similar way you think about employees. Who hires them? Who's their manager? How long are they hired for? How much do you pay for them? And so on and so on. They're not humans, but it's kind of a good idea to use some of the tools that we already have for managing humans and ask yourself, maybe I could use them also to manage agents. Trap number 6, AI is everywhere and humans prefer convenience over compliance. Of course we do. Mess unfolds. In Italy, back in 2023, you might remember the whole country shut down access to ChatGPT because they were concerned about IP. You know what? In 2 days, something really strange happened. All the software developers in Italy, suddenly their productivity dropped the moment ChatGPT access was stopped. We can guess why. In the next 2 days, that productivity rebounded. It sort of coincidentally aligned with a spike in searches for VPN, so a software that allows perhaps those developers to pretend that they're not in Italy. So what people do, whenever there's a ban, we find ways around. It's like prohibition, right? Sort of, there was prohibition in the US, but you could still buy alcohol. And in fact, it was actually worse than before prohibition. How do you avoid that trap? Well, don't ban just like that. Think about creating pathways for your employees to use the best tools or tools that are really as good as those that are outside. Make it easy for people to stay compliant. Easier said than done, but it's very, very important to put a lot of work to help people avoid trying to look for those slightly less official solutions. You might be surprised, but more than 50% of employees all around the world have already used Gen AI tools that were banned or not allowed inside their organizations, and they have used them inside their organizations. Okay, trap number 7, the last trap. AI does what we say, but we never question what AI does, so we end up going faster, but in the wrong direction. AlphaGo, beautiful example. I keep talking about AlphaGo, wrote an entire post about it. Back until 2016, all of the Go masters were roughly the same level for decades, if not hundreds of years. They sort of reached a ceiling of human ingenuity or quality of decision-making in playing the game of Go. 2016, AlphaGo, the algorithm, won against Lee Sedol. This was the first time an algorithm won against a Go master, and then everybody started scratching their heads and thinking, well, if an algorithm is better than humans, then maybe humans could become better as well. So humans started studying how those algorithms played. They weren't copying the algorithms, they were learning from them, and gradually, human quality of playing the game of Go massively increased to the point that we started winning also against AlphaGo. longer story in the podcast. The point here is, don't use Gen AI. That's a trap. Don't use Gen AI just to do whatever you would do, but faster, cheaper, and so on. Get it to challenge your thinking. Say, or ask a Gen AI system, how would you come up, or how would you do this? How would you do that? And then try to learn from that. Recognize that some of those hallucinations, some of those unusual ways that those systems work might actually be quite creative. And we all know that disruption in business often relies on doing things differently to what everyone else does. So flip the question and then flip the solution as well. These are the 7 traps of AI that I identified in the last 12 months, how AI makes us worse. But for each of those traps, there's a way out, and I hope you learned quite a bit from it. That's it. Happy New Year once again, and stay curious.